Okay. It doesn't really matter what I sound like, because I'm not going to be up here very long, but Kristi has a separate mic on, and hopefully that'll work better. It is my great pleasure tonight to introduce Kristi Hager. She's coming to us from Missoula, where she has lived and worked as a self-employed photographer and multidisciplinary artist since 1984. She brings a uniquely artistic eye to the study of Montana history. It's one I always enjoy hearing what she has to say because I learn so much. I don't think as an artist, and so I love to see the perspective that she brings. This is kind of just a little aside. Kristi spoke at our Montana History Conference in Billings in 2008, maybe something like that. And the conference was at the Sheraton. I think it's now the something else. Anyway, it was at the Sheraton, which, as you know, is a high-rise. And she said in the middle of the night before she talked, she was nervous and couldn't sleep, and so she thought she would practice her talk, which was on Evelyn Cameron. And I don't know if you've ever stayed there, but all the rooms are either a window or a brick wall. And she didn't have a screen, so she was just going to project it on the wall. She said, well, that's not going to work. It's brick. So she looked out the window and noticed that there was another brick high-rise across the way. That was a light-colored brick, and she thought, well, I can just project it on that. That will work just fine. So she did and practiced her show, and it was great. But I do know that it was 2 in the morning or so, and that there were some drunks wandering home from the bars in Billings, and they wondered what they saw showing up on the building across the way. Little education whether they wanted it or not.
I thought they might have thought they were seeing Elvis.
Yes. Anyway, Kristi earned her BA in architecture from the University of Pennsylvania and an MFA from the University of Wisconsin at Madison. She, in 2003, she received a Gottlieb Foundation individual support grant based on her 20 years of artistic achievement. She has her photographs were used to illustrate John Axline's book, Conveniences Sorely Needed, Montana's Historic Highway Bridges, which was published by MHS Press in 2005. In 2007, she wrote a book for Far Country Press on Evelyn Cameron. In 2010, she received the Montana Arts Council Artist Innovation Award. And she has over 500 images of photographs that she's taken in the Library of Congress as part of the documents survey, the Historic American Building Survey, so documentary photographs of architecture. And with that, I give you Kristi Hager.
Thank you. Actually, this morning I was out photographing 2 historic transmission towers at the intersection of York Road and Lake Helena Drive. Just so you know, they're historic. And there's going to be a roundabout there, so they'll probably be removed and replaced somehow. Anyway, I was out there photographing transmission towers. You never know. It's just, they get more beautiful the longer you hang out with them, those transmission towers. So I guess I'm just a self-defined scholar on this stuff. I just get interested in something and then I just start researching it. And I wanted to do, to celebrate high plains photography because our state is usually depicted in people's minds with all the mountains and lakes and national parks. And I spend a lot of time in eastern Montana, and I happen to be a big fan of Evelyn Cameron's work. So I got really interested in how this country has been documented over, starting with L.A. Huffman. And so this is L.A. Huffman's first studio, photography studio at Fort Keogh in Miles City. And he took the job to be the post photographer, and this was where he worked. And after a while, he went out and created his own business and had a studio in town. But I like this thought of this as his photography studio. And in my survey from basically 1878, when Huffman came into the state, up to sort of current times, I divided up into a couple of sections that seemed to make sense to me, and one was the big open period before homesteaders came in, and this is a Huffman photograph of the open cattle range. And then this period, the sort of the homesteading period, with and this is an Evelyn Cameron photograph where the prairie became a grain garden. And this is one of my very favorite photographs of hers, because by stepping further away from her subject, she was able to put them in the context of where they were living at the edge of this huge open space. And so instead of getting involved in the buttons and bows of their clothing or family resemblances, I think you're asked to reflect on what it took to keep children clean, dressed, and fed in that environment. And it's sort of an homage to the women and what they were able to do. And then the next period is, most of my information from this period comes from Mary Murphy's book, Hope in Hard Times, but it was the Farm Security Administration's efforts to record the damage of the Dust Bowl, and a lot of their photographers came to Montana. And then the 50s just sort of fell out. I couldn't find a theme there, but I went straight to kind of from, filling the land and then saving the people living here to protecting the prairie, which that movement sort of came in the 1980s. And so it was a different agenda, but I just ask you to think about how much the agenda actually affects the photographs. And then through the 80s up to the 2000s, which is not only to sort of conserve the prairie, but to actually reclaim the prairie and take it out of production. This is, of course, controversial, but it is a different agenda that a lot of photographs were taken up in, mainly in the Charlie Russell National Wildlife Area, in an effort to show the beauty of the place. And the Prairie Foundation, they would like to have land taken out of production instead of into production, which was kind of what Evelyn Cameron was all about, getting people here. So I think that, I'm not sure if you fall into either of these camps, but I like this one, oh God, please don't ever make me live there, versus it's the grand passion of my life. I guess I find it incredibly beautiful, and I guess I haven't chosen to live there. I live in Missoula, but I don't feel, I don't shudder. I have to make a trip over the divide regularly just to see it again. But the other kind of photography that's often exalted in our state is places like Yellowstone Park, and F.J. Haynes was actually the person who taught Huffman the trade of photography. But these photographs were used to promote, the getting national parks, and also were used to the kind of exalted photography of Ansel Adams, where the mountains are the big calling card here, and the charismatic thing. And but I would like to propose that this photograph by Jeffrey James in 2004 has a lot of the same elements of entering, and then there's, entering sort of a waterway, and then there's the high point. With his, you have this coulee, drainage, and this, but everything is soft, and everything is not about high drama. And the other thing about a lot of photography in this particular geology or geography is that it's an inverted landscape. It drops down away from you often, whether you're in the Badlands. And as a photographer, that is a challenging situation. This is done by Lois Connor, and a lot of these photographers kept notes or had diaries or talked about their experience. We know Evelyn Cameron had an exhaustive diary, but I, as a photographer myself, who's been out there outside in Gumar and further, there is this sort of unique feeling of having success under hot, cold, windy, dusty, muddy, lonely conditions. And you're just there by yourself, and you just have to do a tap dance or something. And I also wanted to celebrate landscapes that don't contain people, machines, buildings, livestock, or wildlife or mountains. So the early pictures have more of the people, machines, and livestock because that was the homestead era was what was being celebrated in those photographs. But occasionally Huffman would take a picture without any of those things, but rarely. And by these photographs, the photographers are seeing the land as not just real estate or a setting for human activity. It has power and is a source of illumination in its own right. And one of the places I got some of my best quotes was a book called Montana Spaces that was done in the 1980s as an effort to draw attention to the beauty of the wide open prairie lands. And so this was what I experienced there. The grip of these spaces is elusive and sneaky and powerful, and it's not for everyone. That book, I've read all the essays. I just recommend it. It still seems very useful. But before photography, before Huffman, photography didn't really get invented until 1839. And so how did we record our realities? Well, we had expeditionary painters, taxidermists, botanical presses, field notes, and so I do give a talk on two expeditionary painters, George Catlin, 1832, coming up the Missouri, and I just show, this may seem fantastical and the colors may seem weird, but just go out there when it's really green. It's just kind of amazing, and those land formations are just so exotic. But here's Jeffrey James in 2004 and then the other one that I talk about in relation to George Catlin is Carl Bodmer, and I see you have a lot of Bodmer reproductions out there because he was basically, a scientific illustrator of extraordinary talent and artistic ability, and so his work is so accurate, and he was here before the camera came. Anyway, we have these pictures of the buffalo before photography, and when photography came along, these kind of things weren't happening. We have, this is, again, George Catlin. What we have are photographs by Huffman of buffalo hunts. It's just different when it's a painting. when it's a photograph. And so when Huffman came into the country, these were some of the first things he witnessed, was the sort of the end of the buffalo herds before the cattle came in. And this is him with, I think, the first buffalo he ever killed. And here is his photograph at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. That battle was in 1876, I believe. And he went out to that battlefield in 1878, and this was what he photographed, a pile of bones. So in the pioneer years, the prairie is a feedlot, and Huffman he's often called the photographer on horseback. And he also, this is a photograph of sheep who are stunt doubles for sagebrush here. But he almost can't take a picture without some stock being in the picture. But nevertheless, it's an amazingly beautiful photograph of this country. And again, all those sagebrush imitators here. But we do have one person up there. And Evelyn Cameron, this was her picture. So while I was trying to not have stock in a lot of pictures, you can't get away from it. You have to show it sometimes, because that's what they mainly did, Evelyn Cameron and Huffman. But this was after a snowstorm in 1904. And I got these from the archives here, where her photographs are archived. And what I liked about this series was, which I'll reiterate over and again, a great photograph is not an accident. And it's a concept, and it takes time. And when I looked at this photograph, I looked at the series that was done all on the same day, and it's the exact same view, but in each one, a different amount of snow had melted. Mm-hmm. So the patterning of the snow and the animals was different. And she saw that difference enough to actually take yet another photograph, which is not like using your iPhone. It's a big, expensive glass plate, and she might only take 6 shots a day. So it's a big deal when you push the shutter. So she was standing there watching the snow melt and making artistic decisions that way. And we don't know which one she liked best, because we don't have her editorial input on that. But Huffman, photographer on horseback, he's on a horse. Just look at this. He's sitting on a horse taking this picture, just from the point of view. He's not on a ladder. He's on the back of a horse, and he's got a big camera. That's not easy to do. And handheld camera on the back of a horse that's this big. But he was in the thick of it. And I think that's what's really unique about his photographs, is they sometimes have a more candid quality than Cameron's, because he was shooting literally from the hip. And he was out there on the brandings and cattle drives, as opposed to Cameron, who is the photographer with a tripod. And she set this up, and I'm sure she asked this rider to be right there. He's right in the center. He's quite far from the camera, but he's far, if you see this photograph in a better reproduction, he's looking at her. So she's not invisible. Whereas I would say with Huffman, these people aren't paying attention to him. He's just another cowboy out there. But she said, I want you here. Hold your horse still. I want those mares out there. You know, she choreographed very carefully. And to the point of, this looks like a stage set. You know, they're on the proscenium and there's this backdrop and everybody's in their place. But once in a while, both of these people who were mostly interested in photographing either the ranching operations or the homesteading situations, once in a while they just took pictures of geology. And so this is the Hell Creek Badlands. I don't know. It says, I don't know exactly where they are, but by Huffman. And so what I find that in the best photographs, what they have in common is these qualities, to see the land as having power in itself, and out there there's a combination of sky, geology, and awe. So here's Cameron. If you know anything, she came from England. I bet this was like landing on the moon compared to the estate. She came from a wealthy family with, you know, thoroughbred horses and, you know, side saddle and all that. And here she is in hoodoo land. She was always fascinated with those rock formations. And this photograph of hers of, I think it's Cottonwood Creek. Dolly Creek, north of Fallon. But I want to say that right here is probably her husband, Ewan, and a horse. She often liked having somebody way out there to give scale to the situation. But then she took this picture of soapweed, which I had to find out what it was. It's yucca. And I don't know what she was thinking, but she thought it was a worthy thing to take a picture of. And this is a really minimalist, when we think of modernism and contemporary photography, this is a really minimalist photograph of a bank of yucca. So I don't know what she was thinking, but this is the kind of photograph that will never show up in a book on Evelyn Cameron, because it has no people, no livestock, no mountains, not even any hoodoos. But I want to compare it to this Lois Connor photograph, which has the advantage of a super wide-angle lens and filters so you can see the clouds. But often she was doing promotional photographs for the railroad, and this is one of her neighbors, Roy Williams, but she had him up to his waist in oats to show just how rich the land was. And I don't know if the hat was meant to be a little bit of a joke, or because she had a pretty wicked sense of humor, but there he is in a white clean shirt in that bowler. Or this one, even funnier, where the family is up to their armpits in grain. So wouldn't you want to come and do dry land farming? You bet. But what happened was it didn't rain consistently. We actually don't we live in, it's a semi-arid climate. So when the dry years came, then we started having the Dust Bowl. And so this is a photograph by Arthur Rothstein, who was a photographer for the Farm Security Administration. And you can read this, but I just sort of like at least reading the part of it where he finally says, well, let's just start. 32 was a real good year, but the price of wheat was, well, in Hinsdale it was 15 cents a bushel, and 33 was dry, and 34 was terribly dry. 35 was dry, oh boy, it was dry, and 36 was real dry. And then I went to the Fort Peck Dam and, got a job working on the dam. So Rothstein was accused of staging this picture. which might be true, but this was not a staged picture. And so the idea was to, during these years in the 1930s, was to show the rest of the country the hardships that these farmers and ranchers were undergoing in order to bring support to them, because they weren't having a dust bowl in Washington, D.C., although I think the dust did get there once or twice. But anyway, this is locust. Yeah. And then after the Dust Bowl and after we had these new farming techniques, contour farming and such, and then the Farm Security Administration photographers continued doing photography to show the improvement. Like this is, and we've rural electrification. They had a lot of showing families out of homes that now had electricity. But I love this photograph. Marion Post Wolcott was the only woman who photographed in Montana for Farm Security. And these are her photographs, but I just want to show you, this is how they would have been, how they're stored in the archive, maybe now the Library of Congress. So this is probably about 8 by 10, and with that information on it. Magnificent photograph. She also went to the Crow Reservation, and she also went to dude ranches, because that was another way that people were now making money, which is basically marketing the lifestyle. So this is a guest ranch somewhere near that Crow Reservation, because they show them going to a rodeo, an Indian rodeo, all the guests from this place, this ranch. But anyway, I show them these dudes being taught how to use lariat. And this photograph by Cameron of the Buckley sisters, who were known for their roping skills. And instead of, this is not nostalgia or marketing. They were just good at this, and they were so good at it that people tried to get them to perform for Teddy Roosevelt. And they refused because they were too shy. I want to say this is one of the few shots I've seen by Cameron where she seems to be right in the middle of it, and people are not looking at the camera. But this was very typical. This is Huffman, showing the cowboy at work, the action shot. And I'm not sure if he's on horseback. Does it look to you like that horizon is tilting a little bit? I can't tell from here, but a lot of times his horizons are not quite level because, he's up there. But I wanted to compare that with this photograph by Lee Friedlander, whose work will be featured later on in this talk. But he did a book called America by Car, and I couldn't resist. So another photographer for the Farm Security Administration was John Vashon, and he came here in 1942, and this is in Garfield County, and there's a sheep operation that he was documenting, but he was a young guy, and he would be out here for months at a time. You just send your filth back to Washington, D.C., and Roy Stryker would get it developed, and then you'd talk to him on the phone, and he'd tell you, well, it looked pretty good, but this is what I want you to do this week. And so you'd never see your photographs until maybe 6 months later. So they were just shooting in a certain way. They're just trying to get it right, and they're relying on his feedback. But Vashon did keep notes or had a diary, and he said of the Great Plains, he said, quote, "It was one of his favorite places in the world, like Paris or the Italian Riviera, only different," unquote. And he was from Pennsylvania, and as a Delawarean, I just totally agree with him. It is not the middle of nowhere. It is definitely a someplace, and it's very exotic and mysterious, especially to someone who grew up under a canopy of hardwood trees. You go, really? This is amazing. So he loved it here, even though I don't know, Paris and the Riviera is a tough one. But what I loved about, I want to remind you that a great photograph is not an accident. It's a concept. And that was from Ansel Adams. But this series, and sometimes you really have to look at a series of photographs. That's why archives are great. You can see a sequence that a photographer took. And so here he's on a hillside, and there's sheep down there. And then this is the same little group of houses but he decided to include his truck in the shot. And he probably stepped out of that driver's side door, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of times, and saw the landscape through that fender operation. So it's sort of interesting compositionally. But then one day he decides, I'm going to wash the truck. And it makes all the difference. And that's not an accident. He saw what was going to make this the money shot, what I call the money shot. And so we have this tremendous, the sky is reflected in the bumper in the car, and it's all kind of this, just an amazing, it just transcends the agenda of photographing, people in hard times or people with sheep ranches. It's just a commingling of the sky and the earth and the road, and to me, it's just this amazing photograph, and it didn't happen by accident. He didn't imagine it until he made a lot of like so things, and then finally thought, oh, what if I washed the truck? So I'm just going to give you a very brief reason why I'm sticking only to black and white photography, and maybe if you are a photographer, it just would make sense to you. But color just is like comparing not only apples to oranges. To me, it's like comparing polar bears to flamingos. It's just different. You can't look at these two photographs the same way. The color just brings you into the here and now in a different way, or let's put the pedal to the metal versus this, which as soon as you go to black and white, you're already into a level of abstraction. You're abstracting the image by just going to black and white, and that just puts you this many steps back from the immediacy of the here and now. And then what happens then? Well, with any luck, if it's a really good photograph, then you might let your mind drift into possible metaphor or layers of meaning or something besides this is what it looks like at Fort Belknap. You might get more reflective. And to me, that's what happens. And then also, everything is of a piece. Everything is made of black and white and shades of gray. So it's not grassy grass and fluffy clouds. It's like everything is all of a piece. It's all in monochromatic. So I find it really hard to compare color and black and white aesthetically, although I love both. They're just different. And John Smart was the photographer who did the photographs in the book Montana Spaces that was put out in 1987 and by the Montana Land Reliance. it was edited by Bill Kittredge, and so it's about 80% essays by very good writers, and then maybe a dozen photographs by John Smart, but they're tremendously beautiful photographs of that inverted landscape. And this is a quote that's in the book that I love, and I just know what that feels like. And when I read that, this was the photograph of his that I was thinking of, with this amazing cloud display and land formations. And one thing I would say that, Huffman and Cameron don't have big fluffy clouds in their pictures because the film they was using was not sensitive to color in a way that's called panchromatic, and they didn't have filters. And so the skies just went completely white because the film wasn't distinguishing the color blue from white very well, and it was just the nature of film at that point. But now we can use film is more sophisticated in translating color to black and white, and you have filters to make that even more dramatic. This is a beautiful shot of the C.M. Russell Wildlife Area in 1987, and this was for the Montana Land Reliance. And this is Lois Connor at Missouri Breaks in 2005, and I'm just amazed at how much the land doesn't change, even though we are often lamenting how much things do change. And it doesn't change even no matter what the agenda is. If you can remember that one picture by Huffman of the Badlands, the agendas change, but the great photographers, their work transcends any agenda that might be there. So this is my little bit of challenging for most people, because this Lee Freelander is such a contrarian photographer, and he was working for the book called The Big Open, and he's a New York photographer, and I don't know if you can tell here, but the horizon line, maybe you can't see, it's just a little too bright in here, but the horizon line is here. It's going like this. He doesn't care about that it has to be the way it is. He's composing a picture. He's making a photograph, and he prefers the square format because he isn't talking about landscape or portrait. He's making a photograph with the elements that are in front of him, and if it works better to turn the horizon line like this, that's what he'll do. And or he likes the foreground to be just as wild and busy as the background, and in fact to interrupt your entry into the background. And so you just feel like, why did he do that? Well, it's a concept, it's not an accident, and he did it in the city too. He didn't. So his urban pictures always have this great jumble of foreground, and then you sort of decipher the palm tree or whatever's going on in this neighborhood. And but he's got that full, black to white, all the gray tones, the 10 shades of black and white. And this is his photograph of the Grand Tetons, if you can find them. And as one critic says of him, that his works weave the background and the foreground in this it's a delicious promiscuity of foreground and background. And he also, the same critic said, he's like Ansel Adams on crack. And I think that's a little overstating it, but what I like about it is it's like, let's not clear out the brush. Let's not step over here. let's just include everything all at once. And so it's a different concept from this, which is all about hierarchy. It's like we're going to start here, and we're going to work our way here, and then we reach Valhalla, and it's operatic. It's just plain operatic. And think of what the music should be for this. I don't know, the Ride of the Valkyries or something. But then you get this, what is it? I think of Philip Glass. It's like this sort of pulsating thing that there is no foreground and background. There's no narrative. And I'm not here to show you what it looks like. He's liberated from showing you what the Grand Tetons look like. He's showing you something else. And this is his self-portrait. So if I think about that, this picture, this is to me like ice cream sundae. You got the chocolate, you got the mountain of ice cream, and then you got the whipped cream on top. And it's like orderly, and it's also very, very dramatic. And then with something like this, it's an Oreo blizzard. It's just, everything is all mixed up, and in a way, the concept isn't hierarchical. It's for want of a better word, it's where there are no boundaries, where foreground and background there's no distinction between you and not you. And so it's kind of Buddhist, I guess, if I was to put a name on it, but it's the end of duality. So the concept here is, there's a concept behind, he's not just being a jerk. There's a concept behind this photograph, which is sort of, I think Ansel Adams is asking you to surrender to that glory in a certain way, and he's asking you to surrender, surrender your ego or your sense of self and duality and sort of shatter that. So this seems to be what I see in Friedlander a lot, and it irritates people, but I go, wow, that's so different from how everybody else wants to show us how things are. He's just showing you a different way of how things are, in his view of how things are. That's it. So this is Jeffrey James. He's Canadian, and he has this other. He was working in the same country as Lee Friedlander, and I would say he's like the middle way. He's like, I felt like everything is very soft and gentle and primordial. I mean, these words just popped into my head, not that I'm a biblical scholar, but I thought, and the waters under heaven gathered together in one place, and the dry land appeared. That's the kind of archetypal quality I find in these gentle landscapes. And or like, this is the first rock. It was the first one. And you put it right in the center, because why wouldn't you put it right in the center? And then this one, where there is duality, but it's instead of a ice cream sundae, it's more like mocha. It's very mocha, with maybe with mocha and I don't know what, but it's and you don't have to surrender your identity, or you don't have to give in to Valhalla. You just can walk right in, and there's even little footsteps. You can just walk right in, and the horizon line is at a comfortable level, which is actually the level of a standing human being. So I found his work is kind of what I would call a middle way in terms of looking at the prairie landscape. And Lois Connor is she's very into the panoramic camera thing. So this is near Malta and that inverted landscape, but she did this one as well. And and this panorama, which I guess is another case of actually seeing the actual work, because this whole thing is, I don't know, 8 feet long. So it's probably similar to the size that it's being reproduced here on the screen, but you see it in a book, and it's like this. Interesting choice to put the road over here and not here. But I also want to include a few Montana photographers who photographed this country in recent times and weren't being hired or paid by a foundation, and they just love what they're looking at. And Bruce Psyllium is a photographer out of Bozeman who's done more than one book on grain elevators. And that's his muse, is the grain elevators, and this is one of my favorite ones of his. And then Tom Ferriss, who many of you know here, works here. Again, he's using the square format, which allows you to not immediately go into, like, let's replicate the horizontality of the land, but kind of just that earth, geology or agriculture and sky. But he also did these photographs along the interstate, and they're just labeled Interstate 90. I don't know if he puts the milepost or not, but these were photographed with a pinhole camera, which I won't explain, except to say that the exposures are very long, and so you have the plastic bags blowing in the wind, and it's one of the few photographs that in my survey that really showed the action of wind, showed wind in a way that wasn't shown. Or this one where you exchange white plastic for black plastic, and it's, I don't know how you feel, but it's kind of sinister looking. But again, if this was color, it would have a completely different feel about it. Or this was also a pinhole photograph of where he has this thing in the foreground right in your face that's breaking up everything in the background, but it's not quite as aggressive. He's still got a horizon line that conforms to our sense of how the world operates. And this one, called the Horseshoe Hills. And I just have a personal affinity to the title, even though I love the photograph without the title, but the place where I grew up was called Horseshoe Hill, and it was in Delaware. It didn't look anything like this. So as I said, the common ground, sky, geology, and awe, and this sort of real appreciation for the land, even if the sky is reflected in water. This is a Lee Friedlander photograph that is fairly tame in terms of, asking you to rethink the world. But I'm drawing to a close here. But I liked this quote from Richard Hugo. "The grass flows ever to us, ever away. You can sleep forever in this grass and not be cold." And even though that's not really true, it's a beautiful sentence in a poem, line of poetry, and it made me think of this photograph, again by Jeffrey James, and just to sort of point out to explain why I like this photograph, is because it's both accessible and mysterious in the best sense of the word, of both of those words. And why is it working? Well, it's because he chose to take this picture when the sun went behind a cloud. So we have the big cloud thing happening. But and if he had taken the picture when the sun was not obscured by a cloud, we'd have cloud shadows all over the landscape, and we would have these really, really strong, harsh contrast. It would be the 1,000-watt light bulb sky, stark, isolating, empty. But when he waits until the sun goes behind a cloud, the light is diffused. Everything feels soft. But the mystery is, it's kind of like those Magritte paintings, you know. There's this funny, fluffy clouds, and then everything below is different from that. And so if you don't even analyze it, you know, I analyze it because I do make my living taking photographs, but, you know, most photographers would wait until the sun came out from behind the cloud. I do it all the time. So that makes this prairie penetrable and mysterious too. And then I think David Long wrote one of the most brilliant essays in this book, Montana Spaces, called Straight to the Actual. And he's actually quoting Kittredge. It's a line from Kittredge, one of Kittredge's essays. But I like this thought. Whatever the specific mood of a landscape, there is a solitariness that comes from being the lone set of eyes looking at so much that isn't you, and that will outlast you for about 1 billion odd years. And anyway, this photograph is the one that came into my head when I read that quote. And you know, you've all spent time out in this landscape, and there is that feeling at times of, you know, it's been here a long time, and often I've been out there all day and photographing a bridge and not seeing one human being. And I'm on a road. I'm even on a road.